Okay. So we'll call the meeting to order at 6:04. We have our speaker Vicky. And we'll just keep an eye on the time in general, because Mike will be presenting. So at this time, we'll open the floor to public comment. And when you come up, if you could just state your name for the record, please, and then offer your public comment.
I'm a little confused. My name is Patty Heatherly. Is there a presentation and then we ask questions? Do we bring in questions because we just read the front porch forum?
Yeah.
Or, yeah,
Yeah, so I guess we haven't, as a board, really talked about if we're going to do the second public comment as more of a question and answer type forum, but that's something we've entertained in the past. I think for this first public comment, we'll just leave it to public comment. So if you have something to offer before the presentation happens. And then maybe the second public comment, we can open the floor. Yeah, Steve.
Aaron, you might just explain due to Patty's question, what the agenda is, like just walk it through real quick. That might answer some of that.
Sure, it's pretty simple, I think, but it's just the budget discussion. So last meeting, we did a presentation that was in draft form of what the new proposed budget looks like compared to the previous one. And then we discussed some topics that people had brought to the floor for things that were considerations in those budgets. So that's all that's on our agenda tonight, is going over that budget presentation again.
Pam Marsh from New Haven. First, I just have to say, I'm really disappointed that you don't send out the entire budget booklet. You just send out one sheet of paper. It makes it very easy for people to vote no on the budget. But do you have any of your booklets here today?
No, we do not have any.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we do. Floyd does. Wonderful.
It depends.
Thank you, Floyd.
They're all available online, which are at the MAUSD page.
We prefer to have paper in hand than reading things online.
And certainly to print it, and we have to here today.
Hey, Floyd, do those have any comparisons, or is it just the one that has the?
I have them both,
Okay, so it does have.
but it's not in this stack.
Oh, there's a.
Yeah,
Morning, everyone, again. I'm Shauna. I live in Bristol. I've got last name Gabbett.
does the person who's speaking need a microphone or
we
not?
definitely can. We have one.
I'm sorry, Shona, can you spell your last name?
G-A, B as in Bravo, B as in Bravo, E-I, T as in Tom, T as in Tom.
2 B's, 2 T's?
Yeah.
I just want to turn that.
I can't hear you.
1 second.
Hi, everyone. My name's Shauna. I live in Bristol. I have a son here at Mount Abe and one at Bristol Elementary. I'm here today, obviously, just like you, because I am very concerned about our budget. I'm concerned about where the money is going, not so much the actual number, other than the fact that it will increase taxes, but where it's going to be spent. Historically, in 2023 and previous years, we have spent so much more over budget in areas that we didn't need to, that I feel like now to be sending RIFs to teachers when we could spend so much on capital improvements is not acceptable. To say that we have to cut teachers that are essential, that we need for our students to actually be able to have a positive experience in school, to cut support staff that the teachers need because we don't have the money when we spent so much on capital improvements here. The lobby is beautiful, but it won't help if there's no students or teachers left in this building. We can't keep improving the buildings when there's not gonna be anyone here to use them. We've even considered consolidating schools. Then why are we still doing more projects? We want to know, and I got the line item budget, the actual details. And it still doesn't make any sense. We have repair and maintenance in the budget separately. But yet we still have the construction fund that people think that that's where the money is coming from for repairs, but it's separately budgeted for capital improvements. And I feel like that's a disservice to our voters to make people think that if we don't have the money in the construction fund, that necessary repairs won't be made. But it's separately budgeted for repairs and then a separate $2 million for construction. And with all the 18 RIFs, now 17, but 18 RIFs, every single teacher's job could be saved with that 2 million. But yet, I feel like no one cares other than the voters. But I feel like the administration doesn't care. And that's a very, very sad place to be. But I know I don't want teachers to lose their jobs. But I also don't want to vote yes to the budget because I don't trust the administration to do what's right with it. But I also feel like no matter what I say, it's going to be used anyway. In 2023, we budgeted $1.2 million for construction and we spent 2.9 million when we budgeted 1.2. Where was that money going that we didn't have a say? And to now say that we have to cut teachers' jobs when we could have used that money for something else isn't acceptable to me. ELP, for some reason, is being paid now by all the voters, when previously I thought that was supposed to be paid for by parents that actually use it. So why are all the voters paying for services that we're not receiving? There's so many smokes and mirrors, honestly, that even as a bookkeeper, I still don't understand what's going on in the budget. And so I am requesting more information because I don't trust that things are being as transparent as what they should be. And it's very disappointing, honestly. I feel like you guys are not all of you, but I feel like you guys are not looking hard enough. And that's very disappointing. So I do hope that that does change because the accountability needs to happen. And we are the voters that elect all of you guys. So we need to be heard. And if we think that something's wrong, you guys should be listening to us.
You can do it. Is it on? No. Is it on now? Okay, there we go. Good evening. My name is Amanda Balduke. I'm a parent of New Haven students. I have a 6th grader and an 11th grader who actually does more school through the co-op. My kids have had pretty good experiences here in the system up until this year. I've requested some information. We receive emails very regularly from the principal about Clear the Classroom events. There have been 21 Clear the Classroom events at Beaman this year, and each of these is over an hour. The most recent one, the 3rd graders spent 3 hours in the library while their classroom got trashed, and the 6th graders had to listen to a child screaming for over an hour while they were trying to learn. So I'm not happy with the budget, but I'm going to vote yes. And I'm going to implore you to put that money into the services that our students deserve and the teachers need help. We came here on the 26th of March and asked you for help for our students. And last week, 3 days they spent hiding in the library while their classrooms got destroyed. So please vote yes for this budget, but put the money where it belongs with the teachers and with the classroom aides and with the services that our kids need. Thank you.
there any way that that could be turned up or this louder because?
Yeah.
I think it's how close the person puts the mic. Are we getting feedback from the people? Can they hear?
We tested it before and people said it was good.
Okay.
I don't know, Steve, if you remember which knob, but
Could use that mic that was louder
yeah,
before, right?
this mic is significantly louder. You can pull it up. Yeah.
My name is Patty Heatherly. I have a question, and I may understand this, and I may have a misunderstanding. If the budget, that we're going to vote on April
16.
16 passes, then the RIFs will not happen this school year coming up. Just wanted to clarify that. The other thing, after reading the articles in the Addison Independent, I echo the woman who just spoke about having people who can reach students who are having problems interacting. It's a gift to be able to do that work, and it's not easy. So I think not just our schools are having problems with that, but schools maybe in other places in Vermont, whether there could be a team of people who could figure out ways of serving those students who are having a really hard time so that the majority of the other students can learn in their classroom. And I also have a concern about special educators. And my understanding is that special educators could not be hired because they weren't applying for the job. Was that it? Yes, I see a nod, yes. So I don't know where we can reach out to. Thank you.
Come on up, Brett.
Question.
Yeah, I was just making sure the room was done before I jumped in. I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, come on.
Hi, I'm Patricia King. I live in Bristol. I don't have any kids in the school, but one of my concerns is that we're sending out written notices to teachers, but we aren't doing anything about the size of the central office. Student population has declined over the years, yet we keep increasing the central office. I think if you're going to cut down on teachers, then you should be cutting down on the central office as well. And one of the comment I'd like to make is that there doesn't seem to be any consequence for bad behavior. And I think it needs to be addressed. I'm a former teacher, and many years ago, I taught in inner city, and we didn't have the discipline problems. And when we had rules, they followed them. If they didn't, there were consequences. I don't see that happening in Bristol. And I'd like to know what, excuse me, I'd like to know why.
Hi, I'm Courtney Kavancha. My kids go to Bristol as well. Touching on what Amanda said, we've had that issue at Bristol for years, and I know New Haven has too. The only difference with New Haven and Bristol is we don't get notices anymore. We rarely have clear the halls. We have class evacuations, which doesn't make it any better. leaves the one child there to do the destruction, in turn has to get paid for by us as taxpayers. My kids don't cause these issues. My kids don't cause clear the halls. They don't wreck the classrooms. They don't break things. And I'm still paying for it. I'm at the school a lot between volunteering and subbing. I see the behaviors. I see the lack of responsibility on their part. There is none. And if it was me, I wouldn't want to change my behavior either if I got some of the rewards that are going around. To what Shonda said with finances and the amount over in the $2 million, that money would do wonders for not only the kids that have these behavioral needs, but all the other kids that are being overlooked because of these behavioral needs that don't get anything out of the deal, except for having to leave their class for 55 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, and then be expected to go back to their class and learn. It doesn't happen. Does not happen. And then touching on the topic of RIFs. The Champlain Valley School District is revoting as well, as many districts in Vermont are. They're revoting next Tuesday as well. And they have put forward their budget, a redo of their budget, which I think it said was $2 million plus less than what they were asking. But they have been straightforward where their cuts are coming. And they have 42 positions that they plan on riffing if their budget doesn't pass. 7 of them are from their district and central offices. 19 are paraprofessionals and 16 are teachers, in that order, because that is where their money is most spent. Much like our district, that is where the money is spent. Think of all the money that could go into the school, into the teachers, into special services for these kids that need it and are not getting it. If we just made the right cuts in the right places. Cutting teachers when there's a shortage of teachers and nobody applying for these jobs in the first place is not the way to go. We can't afford to lose our teachers. We lose our teachers, we have no one to teach our kids, we can't open a school. What's gonna happen then? What's gonna happen to the education of our kids? As taxpayers, we really do have a right in what is happening. And I, along with everybody else here, really wish that this board will really finally start to take action and listen to us, because it's our kids. They're our kids, and that is what is important. Not tucking money here, tucking money there, or padding somebody's pocket. It's making sure our kids get the best out of public education that they can get. Not everybody can afford to send their kid to Willowell or to Red Cedar or any other private school, and we're trusting you with our kids and their education for 8 hours every day from August to June. And I, with my kids, still feel like I have to educate them because their teachers are amazing, but they have so many other things that are happening in their classes that they can't focus on teaching their classes as a whole. We need to put all this extra money into special ed and the teachers and help for the teachers to get all the kids where they need to be and get all the kids what they need.
Anyone else in the room?
Hey, my name is Fred Schroeder. I live in Bristol. I have 2 boys. One's graduating in 2020, one's gonna graduate this year. And it's the first time I've ever come to a meeting like this, but I don't really have a dog in the fight. And my son's gonna graduate in 2 months and he'll be off. I'm here because I'm upset about the taxes. I voted no for the first time, for the first vote. I'm going to vote no again. I'll tell you why. The layoffs are for the wrong people. The central office needs to be cut. There could be so much money saved, and the teachers should be given the jobs, not the central office. It's so easy to see. It's just wrong. And I will not vote until the central office gets cut. Second of all, the whole let's buy the building over on Munsalat or over there, that's just crazy. I mean, you guys need to be in this school, in one of these buildings, seeing the students every single day, seeing them clear the halls, experiencing that. You need, the central office needs to be there and see what's going on. When I went to school in South Burlington High School, our superintendent office was at the school. We saw the superintendent every single day. And to remove yourself and go off in that other building, it's a great place, but how many people are there? My wife went to school here at Mount Abe in the 1980s, and there was 5 people in the central office. Now there's how many? Almost 20? Can someone tell me?
There are 13.
13. Okay, so more than double. But so do we need that many people? I think that's all I really want to say. My taxes have gone up triple since I moved here. I moved here 20 years ago. And my taxes have tripled. And now I'm just a person who lives here in town, and I'm going to be penalized with taxes. For anyway, I said enough. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room before I jump over to the Zoom platform? Okay, Wendy on Zoom.
Hi, my name is Wendy Lossman. I'm a resident of Bristol, taxpayer. I would just want to start with thanking the school board for the last meeting. I really felt like you guys were actively listening to the townspeople's concerns and the teachers' concerns, the parents' concerns, and asking clarifying questions on these tough and tricky issues. And I just want to say I really, really appreciate that. I hope that that's going to continue. Keep digging into these issues until we get some satisfying answers to some of these issues that I know are not any fun for anybody to talk about, but they need to be dealt with. So thank you for that. As far as the kids' behavior, I want to touch on that. I've said this 100 times. I worked in the school district for over 20 years. Our schools are not equipped to deal with these kids that have these issues and these behaviors. I don't blame the kids. I don't blame the parents. We are not equipped to deal with them. And it's a huge disservice to those children with the issues and to all the other children that we don't acknowledge that we can't accommodate them and get them the proper help that they need. This is not the place for them, or we need to get better services, one or the other. And I really am concerned about why we can't attract special educators and teachers to our district. I think we need to take a hard look at that and find out why. Why aren't people attracted to work here? What's going on? What are they hearing about our district? And maybe fix some of those problems so we can get some people in here that really want to come to our district and really love our students and want to work with them. The teachers that we have are amazing. They're fabulous, but they need our support. They need the school board support. They need the superintendent's support. They need the townspeople's support. They need the parents' support. They cannot do it on their own. They're wonderful people, but they cannot do it on their own. Thank you.
Kim? You're muted. Okay,
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Kim Callahan. I live in New Haven. We had 2 girls go through Mount Abe, graduated. They're both in graduate school right now, and they both had great experiences. And I've been involved in the community engagement committee in the community meetings that we had for 3 years. I think there were community meetings so the community could come together and prioritize what we wanted as a community. And I have seen the district try really hard to come up with solutions, and they're big changes because that's what the district needs to do in order to solve the financial issues that we're having. And we were warned about this. The community has known about this for a long time. We brought the community together to submit proposals about how we could solve this problem. We had a consultant come in. The consultant worked with the community, established a committee to come up with what the questions and concerns might be. Some people in the community felt that wasn't enough and decided to go off and do their own thing. And it derailed this opportunity that we had to come up with some big solutions. And it feels like at this point, the writing has been on the wall for a while, and COVID, the Act 127, all of the things that have gotten in the way since that time. I mean, these are huge, huge issues. So I have been following this. I've been coming to the meetings. I've been involved in trying to help find solutions. And I think if people stop feeling like there's some underlying effort to fool the people in the community about the finances, or to pull the wool over their eyes about what the actual finances are, all you need to do is go back and read the board meeting minutes from the last 5 years. Go back, look at the videos. Our school board has done an awful lot, and the community all along has said, we don't want to make those big changes. We want our small schools. We don't want to merge our middle school and our high school. And those were things that would have taken a lot of the financial burden off. So we can't have it all ways. And I think that this community needs to understand that we've got to give something up. And that if we don't support our school, if we don't support our district, our teachers, that we're not supporting our community and we're not supporting our kids. So we can vote no. That's fine. If you want to do a protest vote, your issue really is with the state and with what's happening with education funding. So I just, I generally am a pretty patient person, and I've listened to a lot of public comment over the years. And I just think people need to really understand what's going on and how hard the district has worked to address this. So thank you.
Last call for public comment before we get to our presentation. Randy?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm new to Zoom, so it's kind of a lesson here. Anyways, I had put a comment in the Moncton website, and I've done some research on the budget and stuff like that. There's a student population right now that we have 1137 total students. And our budget that you're asking for is 35,957,000 and change. That is a cost of
The guy who's in it. Yeah, the guy who's in it is asked to be reappointed.
Hello?
Sorry, Randy, keep going.
Okay, the total student population is 1137. The budget's 35 million. It's costing 31,625 per student to educate them. Now, this is money that we, the taxpayers, pay from our 5 towns. It's not coming from state or anywhere like that. It's what you're asking us to dish out to you for, the education. I'm all for education, don't get me wrong, but we have to make some serious cuts, and we have to make it so that we can still live within the community while supporting our school. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else from Zoom or in the room?
I'm Brenda Lathrop, and I have two sons and a grandson that have gone through Mount Aid, and two granddaughters that are here now. I just have one question. If the budget is not passed, will there be any more rifts? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett LaRose. I'm a Bristol resident. I just have a question, and maybe it's been circulated out there in social media, but the only social media I do is Front Porch Forum occasionally. It's just regarding the lobby project. What was the budget for that initially?
Can we get that answered to you?
Sure.
Okay. You want to finish your question?
I'm under the impression it cost many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars more than it was budgeted for. Is that an accurate statement? How did that happen? Did contractors over budget? Were change orders being signed with no visibility on it? Why?
Yeah. So again, can we get that answer to you? And at the, we do have the answers, but we're in this sort of funny space where we don't typically do a question and answer public comment situation, but we've kind of been quasi doing that already. So I'm just wondering if you might allow us to get you those answers during the budget presentation, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. I've reached out to a couple of you. I haven't heard back yet. So, I served for 5 or 6 years on the Lincoln School Board when Lincoln was part of the district and there were separate boards, and these used to be kind of interactive. And I don't know how the rest of these folks feel, but I kind of feel like I'm talking to the people on TV. I'm not getting anything, and I get you can't have every number at your fingertips, but if this was a little more interactive, might be a little more positive outcomes.
All right.
Can you hear me? Okay. You can go round and round with a budget. The most important thing.
Say your name for us.
Oh, Alan Quitner. The most important thing is to understand what's in the figures. The only way we can understand what's in the figures, if each $1 million part of the budget is explained, like how many staff members, how many paraprofessionals, and so on, so that at this point, it's really hard. There's a lot of work to do. This should have been done, we should have all been here in the fall when they were going over these budgets. But somebody could say, if it's $1.5 million, how many people? I'd rather see some curriculum person, I just take that as an example, cut than have a teacher cut. But we're not talking about teacher cuts, we're not filling positions. The only reason that teachers were ripped, in case the budget goes down, then they have to look, and it's a contractual issue. So we need to realize this, that maybe if the budget should be voted down, what are the other options besides cutting staff? So my question is, I would like, and I know it's a lot of work, by the way, we need the superintendent's office. That is the least of my concern. I'm more concerned about some of the other multi-million-dollar part of this budget. So we need the superintendent's office, and we need the board who works very hard. Thankless job. Okay, so I would like to see some of these tickets, like $1.5 million, $3 million, with some kind of explanation. Maybe it was done back in the fall, but we need it now before the vote next week. Okay. Oh, how do we compare? We're looking at $35,000 a student for this budget. I think there's what, 11, maybe a little less, 33,000. But how do we compare with other districts? A district with 1,100 students, do they have a $35 or $33 million budget? I try to get some information from the state, and that was not easy. So, we need more help, get no funding from the state or federal government except for special ed, which is what, about $7 million. We need, number one, we need some kind of information on the over the $1 million parts of this budget, not the superintendent's office, not the teaching staff, but all these other areas that add up to around $11 million. So I guess, let me think. So I guess we all should have this budget. I put a link out so people could look at the budget, but unfortunately it never got to some of the other towns. So you need to get your neighbors, to look at the budget. And then if they can put out some kind of information about these high ticket items, then we could really make a good choice April 16th. Thank you. I think the vote, I think the vote may need to be extended for more information.
Kathy on Zoom.
Yes, this is Kathy Martell, and I work at the Bristol Elementary School. And since this has been going on, I've started attending other school board meetings. And I was in a school board meeting last night, and they were trying to come up with their budget. During that meeting, they had all their percentages, 1%, 2%, 3%, and they were very, very, very transparent with their voters and their townspeople as to, if we cut 1%, these are the positions. If we cut 2%, this is who's going to lose their job. If we cut 3%, this is the programs we have to come out. That's what our district needs, so that people can be informed, not waiting until after we find out if it passes or not, who's then going to lose their jobs and where the money's going to go.
Anyone else? We're going to move on to the budget presentation.
So we understand, as the budget is being presented, we are not to interrupt, but take notes and then ask questions but before 7 o'clock or something. I don't know.
Mike, you wanna,
I'm fine either way.
what do people think about question and answer format during the presentation? Yeah.
There's any reason not to do that.
Okay.
The easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Save your questions till the end, or ask them during the presentation.
Okay. Yeah, Vicky.
I don't think you've moved to approve the agenda.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so, just backing up a sec, I'll get to you in just a second. Before we move on to the budget presentation, can I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Kathy?
Second.
Mike,
Second.
All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions, okay, so it sounds like,
Speak louder, please.
so it sounds like we will entertain questions during the budget presentation. So if you have a question, you just raise your hand. Mike's our presenter tonight, and so you just, Mike can direct traffic with those questions. And then we'll answer some of the questions that we got earlier as well.
Patrick? Good. All right, well, thanks, everybody. It's wonderful to hear feedback and comments, both virtually and in person. Like, it's a really important part of this process. And so now what we're going to move into is a brief presentation, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I tend to be a little long-winded, so please bear with me. And the goal of this presentation is really twofold. I think the major focus is to try to give as much clear information as we possibly can about the specific vote that we as a community will have 1 week from today. Beyond the details of that revised budget, the goal of this presentation really is to provide a little bit of broader context, a sense of how did we get to where we are with this revised budget, and also what does it mean after April 16th? Because either way, the problems don't go away on the 17th. Right? These are problems that are really forward, they're long-term, and we as a board and as administration, as a community, are undoubtedly going to have to work together to really address some of these really big issues. So again, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the education funding throughout the state, talk a little bit about the failed budget vote, again, as context of how we got to here, give some information about the revised budget, and then maybe a forward-looking view. Okay, so what's education funding look like in Vermont? And again, if you were here last week, we did like a draft version of this, which is going to look really similar, just updated by some board comments and some comments from the community, including some terrible AI artwork that I didn't get a chance to change out. So sorry, and you're welcome. So what's the state of education funding in Vermont in very quick terms? I think it's really important to put into context our own failed budget, in that a third of all proposed budgets failed. And I've only been here in Vermont for about 10 years, but my sense is that that's pretty unprecedented to have such a widespread rejection of school budgets across the state. Beyond that, I kind of get it. Like, these failed budgets would have resulted across the state in property tax increases between 15 and 30%. Also unprecedented kind of numbers. And on average, it was projected before the first round of votes that across the state, property taxes would increase on average about 18 to 19% through increased educational spending. And I start here because I really want to point out that while we as a local district have many challenges that we need to address, clearly a lot of the challenges that we are facing are actually challenges that are out of our control. These are statewide factors, presumably nationwide factors, that are driving sharp increases in spending and consequently taxes. So any changes that we talk about for our April 16th budget or a future budget need to be thought of in the broader context of widespread increases that are being driven again through educational spending, not only in our district, but really all throughout the entirety of the state. So with that as the context that we were working in, I want to talk a little bit about the aspirations of the board with the first proposed budget that was voted down. So as we, throughout the fall, we're working with the administration to develop a budget that we proposed to voters. We really started with the previous year's budget, right? A budget that the electorate had approved. And we sort of saw that as the baseline and wanted to try to maintain those services, right? The commitments that we made through our last budget in terms of commitments to teachers, to students, and to student supports. So we ended up with what was called a level service budget, right? The aspiration that we wouldn't be cutting any of the services that we as a community had decided were important in the previous budget. That said, there was still a large gulf between the 23-24 budget and the proposed budget. And that gulf was really driven by a lot of new constraints, things that either increased our costs or decreased our ability to spend. Part of this was the new weighting, the Act 127 weighting formula. Some of this was expiring federal funds that were supposed to offset some of the challenges associated with the COVID pandemic. Rising healthcare costs, driving overall spending. Again, these are healthcare costs that are not negotiated within district, but are statewide. Just to give you a sense of a single number there, those costs are increasing by 17% year over year. And a really important one that again is largely out of our control is the overall rising statewide education costs. What this does is it decreases the yield, which is essentially the amount, the baseline amount per pupil that we as a district receive. So essentially, if spending goes up all throughout the state, even if we don't change our spending, it still costs us more, right? So when you take all of those factors and try to maintain the services, that brought us to the initial 24-25 proposed budget, right? Maybe just to be really direct about it, it was the goal of the board to maintain the supports to the community, to our students, to our teachers. And in order to maintain those exact same supports, the final budget was quite a bit higher as a consequence of these new constraints. If that makes sense. To give you a little bit of sense of what that looked like in terms of numbers, the initial failed budget was going to increase total expenses by about 8.5%, a little over $3 million. This is offset by a little bit of additional revenue, but ultimately, all told, educational spending in the initial proposed budget was going to be increased by about $2.2 million. With the new weighting formula, we did have a higher weighted pupil count. And interestingly enough, if you see that number in red right there, the amount of spending per weighted pupil actually decreased year over year. And I want to take a moment to really point that out because that is the bottom line of what we as a district can control, right? All of the other factors that come into things, everything else being equal, the only thing that we can control in terms of our own property taxes is that spending per pupil count. And yeah, please.
What's a weighted student?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to be top level and then push me more if you want more details. But essentially, the state recognizes that it doesn't cost the same to educate all students. Some students have additional needs that are going to come with additional costs associated with that. Prior to this year, there was a long-term average
equalized pupil prior to.
Equalized pupil, right? So there's a particular formula that would say based on the number of students that you have and the characteristics of those students, the state would say this is your weighted student count to try to account for those additional needs. Essentially being able to allow districts that had additional needs to spend more money without an impact on their baseline property tax. With Act 127, which was passed and is effective for this year as the first year, that formula changed in terms of how the state viewed students' needs. So there was sort of a reevaluation of how we went from the number of students to the sort of need that's a function of the number of students and the characteristics or demographics of those students. Does that make a bit of sense? Yeah, perfect. So we have this reduction in the per pupil spending account, which again is the bottom line, right? And this actually decreased even with the increase in expenses and education spending. Our per pupil spending actually decreased by a little over 1%. Even with that, however, with a decrease in per pupil spending from the previous year's budget, as I don't need to tell any of you, I'm sure, the increase in projected property taxes with the initial budget would have been about 13 to 18%. Why is that the case? Let me show you real quick. So there's a lot of numbers here. I'm going to try and focus on a couple of things. The first is going to be this estimated homestead tax rate, the before CLA column. This is again comparing the previous year, financial year 24 to financial year 25. And what you can see is maybe a little perplexing at first. This is the base tax rate that the state sets as a sort of per pupil tax rate. And even though our per pupil spending declined, the base rate year over year actually increased by about 3%. Why? Because statewide spending increased so much that the base yield decreased. Right? So essentially, even though we were managing our finances at a lower level per pupil spending than the previous year, because there was so much of an increase in spending across the state, the yield decreased and this homestead tax rate increased by about 3%. Now that 3% doesn't get us to that far column of 15, 16, 13% increase in property tax. The key ingredient that gets us from that base tax to the actual projected property tax is going to be the change after the CLA, or the common level of appraisal. So as home values have increased, right, our appraisal, our appraised values have decreased relative to those, I guess, around the rest of the state. And so you have to make an adjustment so that the rest of the state is on a level playing field. That's the CLA. And when you make that adjustment, we jump up to this almost $300 increase per $100,000 of assessed value that you all saw in the first budget, and those 13 to 15, 16, 18% tax rate increases. Again, just to take one step back, if we think about our control as a district and as a community, we did decrease our per pupil spending year over year. And despite that, the increase was on the order of about 15 to 18%, which maybe isn't that surprising given that the projected tax rates across the state were going to be about 18 to 19%, a little bit more than where we even ended up as a district with that first budget. Is there, you had a question there? Oh, yes, please.
Do you possibly have what it would have been if we didn't, in November or October, you guys had presented two budgets and you leaned on like option A or option B. You selected one of them that had the increased amount in the construction budget. Do we have any idea what a difference that would have made if we would have selected the other option?
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm happy to go into that. Ultimately, the option that we selected as our initial option, we couldn't pursue. So that isn't reflected in this budget at all. So those monies were taken away. This was an artifact, if you will, of Act 127. Previously, there had been a tax cap to try to protect districts from really large property tax increases associated with the changeover of the weighting of pupils that Act 127 provided. And at that moment in time, our district, like many others, realized that there was a potential opportunity to ask for more money, but not impact our own property taxes because of that tax cap. The problem was, we weren't alone in this thinking, and as every district from many districts throughout the state asked for more and more and more, knowing that they wouldn't see an increase of more than 5% of their property taxes because of this artificial cap, that raised really big concerns that the yield would continue to plummet, and that translation between per pupil spending would keep going down, and it would rise costs dramatically throughout the state. So that's where Montpelier stepped in and said, you're not going to get to do that. And we had to very quickly revise our budgets to get rid of that excess spending, knowing that that cap wouldn't be in place anymore. So the direct answer to your question is, it's no longer in, and it wasn't in the budget that was voted on at all, those increased capital expenses.
And how many years did that increase happen? Or was that a one-shot?
A one-shot in response to Act 127 this year. So it was sort of a little bit of an accounting trick that was supposed to allow us to bring more funds in that ultimately didn't work. So the directors, I appreciate the question, because maybe it highlights the challenge that we as a board and as a state have faced, especially this year. Not only are there increasing costs occurring throughout the state, but they're also coming in a really new ecosystem that we're all trying to navigate, right? With new legislation dictating funding and us having to try to merge our budget into that overall picture.
Yeah, just to clarify, so are you saying the other option had more capital improvements?
Significantly more. Money allocated to that. The idea was that we would have had essentially taxpayer-free. And yes, everyone gets a good laugh at that. But money that if we didn't ask for it, it was going to go everywhere else in the state and we were going to be left out. That's what it appeared. And the thought was we didn't want to encumber ourselves long-term because that would have been a real problem next year's budget. So the money was put into those capital services as a way to try and make use of this one-time bonus money that never came to fruition and doesn't show up here. Yeah, perfect. So, yeah.
Might want to explain the disparity between Stocksboro.
Oh, yeah,
and
yes,
New
this
Haven.
is a great point. Yeah, so this is more of the mess of statewide education funding, right? Is that depending upon when the last reappraisal was in a given town, right? the common level appraisal for that town could be very different. And so what you can see in the case of Starksboro is actually numbers that are kind of hard to interpret. I fully acknowledge that. In that it projects a 20.6% decrease in the projected tax rate. And the reason for that is that Starksboro's reappraisal came in, and you can see, is it up here? Yes, that their FY25 CLA is at 100%. So the short of this is now property values in Starksboro are much higher because the appraisal has come in. And as a result, the overall tax rate, the percentage of those property values that one would pay actually decreases. Maybe to spell it out in another way, it's not that really Bristol, Moncton, New Haven, or Starksboro are being differentially affected by this change in the budget. Instead, it's again more of an accounting issue, right? Bristol, Moncton, and New Haven are paying high rates on low property values to get you to whatever that value is. Whereas now Starksboro is going to be paying a lower rate on a high property value, and it gets you to basically the same place. So we would broadly say that the tax impact in terms of dollars should be about the same across the 4 towns, with the important caveat that a given appraisal, a given property in Starksboro might have been affected differently by the reappraisal than, say, their neighbor. And so on a house-to-house basis, there might be a difference, but overall it should be relatively equivalent. Did I get you?
Perfect.
Yeah. Yes, please, Alan.
So if it's 214 per hundred, that means that every 100,000 would be 2141, $2,000 for that assessed house. Is that correct? And I think that's key to understanding the budget. So Starksboro with the reappraisal is, we don't know, because some people maybe will be paying more and some will be less. So I'm not sure that's a good evaluation for Starksboro on what they will be paying. But what I am sort of sure about, anybody in that $2 range is going to be paying around $2,000 for every $100,000 value of their house. Is that correct or not? So I think this is important for the people to see. But 70% of the people in the state get some kind of homestead reduction. So that leaves 30% to pay the rest.
So maybe just take a step back again, right? We see that statewide costs are increasing throughout the state, throughout other districts' budgets, right? There are external factors that are driving these costs. We as a board initially tried to maintain the services that were approved in the previous year. That led to this budget, which somewhat paradoxically was a decrease in per pupil spending that nevertheless produced significant increases in property taxes. And, oh, sorry, do that here.
Mike, can I just, clarify something if you want to just
Yeah.
go back to what Alan was saying? So the way to do that math is if, let's use a $300,000 assessed value for ease of math, you would take 3 times the 293.60 there to get how much your property tax is going to increase, because it's per 100,000 of assessed value. So in this instance, it's just under $880. Then to Alan's point, if you get a property tax adjustment, likely, then the amount out of your pocket will be less. But it's not $2,000. I just wanted that point of clarification for those listening in.
Yeah, I think Alan was trying to say maybe the base rate was
Okay,
about
I
to,
don't-
but you're right, but it's important to put out that
That is
change.
the education
Yes.
rate, not the municipal rate.
Yes, for sure.
Got it.
So we have this budget, we proposed it to maintain services, knowing full well that it has a pretty hefty, to say the least, property tax impact, one that's lower than the average across the state, but nevertheless is substantial. And obviously it didn't pass. So that brings us to where we are now. That brings us to our vote on April 16th, right? This revised budget. So what did we really want to do in response to the failed budget vote? So we've been listening. We've been having meetings like this. We've been reading, we've been reaching out to community members, and through community input and our conversations, I think we've heard 2 pretty consistent messages. The first was that even though it would have maintained the same services, it was simply too much. The educational spending was too much. The second, which is a little bit trickier and a little more nuanced, is as we heard tonight, right? Many community members would also like us to examine exactly how the budget is allocated. Right? I think both of those are really valid points. Some are easier to address on the short term and some might be easier to address on the long term. So I'll just put a pin in that for now. So what did we do faced with a failed budget vote? Well, as a board, we decided that we really wanted to try to maintain district services, support for students. So we instructed Patrick as superintendent to develop a series of revised budgets that had various levels of overall reductions in the final property tax increase that you as the electorate would see. And as we instructed him to give these different scenarios, we asked that he would mitigate the increases in taxes, right? That was the driver right there, but also minimize any anticipated reductions in support. So he came and gave us a couple of different scenarios, and ultimately we as a board selected one that we presented to you that will be voted on the 16th. This is the revised budget, and I think it's our hope that this will hopefully satisfy our goals as a community and as a board, while potentially also giving us the necessary time to more fully evaluate the budget as we move forward as a community. So what happened with this revised budget? Here's an exhaustive list of all of the changes that were made between the initial budget and the revised budget. Again, the goal of the revised budget, much like the initial budget, was try to maintain all of the supports and services that the community had already voted for the previous year. The way that we got to this, that the central office got to this, is there are a few positions that are not filled. These were positions that were advertised, that were open all of last year, but were vacant. Right, so these are 3 classroom positions at Mount Abe, half an FTE of professional position. Some changes to this Addison Consortium program that are not really driven by the budget vote per se, but were ongoing conversations, it sounds like. And so that ultimately resulted in a reduction of some spending. Some removed teletherapy funds for speech language pathologists because they already were able to hire a speech language pathologist within the district. Again, 1 vacant maintenance and utility position not filled, and also a social emotional learning coach. 2 other important budgetary changes that I think are somewhat unique to this revised budget is that the construction services line was reduced by about $250,000, so less spending on those construction services. And $305,000 were allocated from the Education Reserve Fund, which has the current balance as you see right there, to offset some of the costs. The latter 2 really having the key point of reducing costs, but maybe not in a sustainable way, right? Reducing costs for this year's budget, but we can't pull $300,000 from the Education Reserve Fund indefinitely. But it might give us some time to consider, how do we reallocate funds? How do we re-envision MASD budget going forward while still being able to support our faculty, our students this year? Yeah, please.
So my understanding is the ERF fund is there to use if you need it, which is great. Let's use it. This is great. How much money are we saving from ripping those 17 positions? How much actual money is being saved by ripping positions?
People think they're losing their, I don't.
If
think they're
the
contractual.
budget doesn't pass, how much money is being saved by those 17 positions? And also, if there's more cuts coming, where are those coming from and how much will that cost? How much will that not cost, but how much will that save?
I don't have a direct number on the exact amount for the 17 positions, but maybe I'll give you a little context there. I'm going to skip ahead and then we'll come back to this. The revised budget ultimately gives us this number, $35,957,401 is total expenses. We would need to get, would you need total expenses or education spending, Patrick, to get a level, if the vote goes down? What's the number that we have to hit? The education spending number or the total expenses or some combination? Because
you get to hit any number we want.
if there was no
The budget goes down.
If there was no budget approved, our worst case
You
scenario
have to go
is
back to last year's budget.
last year's budget. But in terms of expenses or education spending?
Ultimately, it's education spending that drives the cost per pupil. So that would be the figure that we would be looking at.
Okay.
So if it doesn't pass and more risks come, it will be for teachers again, and not elsewhere?
I'll take one step back and then I'll come back to this if we need to. So maybe some context that we provided a little bit last week, but I'm happy to provide again here. So the RIF notices is a reduction in force, the sort of warning that a position might not be renewed for the next year, were issued to licensed teaching faculty as a consequence of contractual obligation to provide those notices by April 1st. They are the only employees within the district who have that April 1st deadline. And so the idea is that if the budget ultimately fails and we were forced to basically operate the district at the previous year's spending, those notices would have to be in place before we knew that to be able to help us get to that point.
Yeah.
They don't preclude reductions in staffing anywhere else,
No.
Central office or otherwise.
So if the budget doesn't pass again, and last week you said we can keep redoing the budget until June, keep revoting on that. My question is, if the budget doesn't pass, and then it doesn't pass again, and we are looking to deduct more, to save more, is it gonna come at the expense of teachers and staff continually before looking elsewhere to take money and save money elsewhere?
Yeah, I guess I can't speak directly to that, right? Because we as a sort of policy governance board we don't drive the proposed budget. We review it with Patrick and
I can answer it, I think.
Perfect.
And I only ask because of concern for teachers and staff and keeping our schools open, but like, Champlain Valley, they put out their budget and they said 7 positions from district and central office, 16 positions of paras, or 19 from paras and 16 from teachers. So they, whether it's an April 1st deadline for a RIF notice, which I totally get, they know where their cuts are gonna be coming from. So everybody that works in the district is prepared in the event of a failed budget that it could be. You know, the parents know it's them, people from the district know that it could be them, teachers know that it could be them, but it goes in that order. And they know that that is a possibility. All we know is that the April 1st deadline was coming, the April 1st deadline came and went, and it was teachers, but we don't know if it keeps failing, where else our cuts gonna be made to try to make up the difference to save the budget, to something where I don't feel like the town wants to keep voting no on the budget. But we need to see where the money is actually gonna go, where it benefits our schools, our teachers, and our kids.
So I'm not entirely sure if the Champlain Valley reductions that you're talking about are part of the budget people will be voting on next, or if it's about the reductions that would be needed in the following budget potentially. So I'm not 100% sure about that situation. In terms of in MAUSD,
Oh, yeah.
right, so that's what I was trying to sort of separate out. So the only way any RIFs are needed in MAUSD is if the vote on April 16th doesn't pass. So going into all the depths on where all of the savings to get to the April 16th vote have been listed multiple times in this presentation. Like that is everything there. Any of the RIFs are for a future budget vote in the event that April 16th doesn't pass. And so one of your questions was, will there be any more reductions if that budget fails? Not from the teachers covered by the collective bargaining agreement, the licensed professionals. The RIF notices that went out are the most possible RIF notices that we could issue essentially in any scenario. Because anyone who is currently employed that didn't get a RIF notice got a contract. So we now have a binding legal agreement to employ them for a subsequent year. So the only way we would have any other positions reduced would be if somebody chose to leave and we chose not to fill that position, which we've done every year for the last several years. But no more RIF notices to that group of licensed professionals.
So now we're talking like support people.
Essentially everywhere else in the organization is where we'll be looking for the additional savings, because also those RIF notices don't equate to the total savings we would need if we got to a level spending budget in the end. There would have to be savings that came from elsewhere, and we would look in lots of different places. And frankly, I don't know that there's a whole lot of room to reduce in the support staff level. That's another sort of group that exists, right? So
The RIFs that did go out, is that putting a dent into? I guess I'm just curious as to, and we're lucky being smaller. I know other districts have many teachers that got RIFs. But I'm just curious as to financially, how is that helping with the budget?
Yeah, well, so it has nothing to do, so that's the piece that has. It's probably a stretch to say it has nothing to do with the budget on April 16th. It only has to do with if that budget doesn't pass. So they're two separate issues that I think are getting confused a little bit, understandably. But in terms of I can't pull the exact figure right now, but the collective savings of the RIFs is well over $1 million.
And we keep sort of skipping what happens after April 16th if it doesn't pass, because we kind of want to get through this presentation and then talk about that. We have to go through a whole nother process of examining the whole budget after April 16th doesn't pass. That may include all of the RIFT folks. It may include only part of the RIFT folks. We were forced legally to give those RIFT notices. We did not want to. We asked the union if we could delay it until after the vote, but they did not want to delay that notice.
No, and I get that. I'm just.
So, you know, where we're gonna cut next is really a whole discussion for the board to have and the community to have after the vote. We just don't know yet.
I think it's very, very important that the simple statement of if the budget passes on April 16th, then the teachers will have.
There's no risk.
Yeah, but I think there's confusion. And I think it would be very important to make that clear statement by somebody who's to be believed in every town. No, I'm serious, because we're working with confusion and that's not healthy. And we want, well, I personally want to touch that.
Yeah, so what I was needing to clarify, because obviously things go over budget all the time, period. That what if this budget fails, because again, people are concerned. The people that did receive RIFs, can we not just take money that was allocated to something else and give them their contracts and say, no, we're not gonna give them RIFs, we're gonna take it from somewhere else because the voters said no?
That's a possibility.
Anything's possible.
So when we
Anything's
are.
possible. Is that what you just
So,
said?
technically, when we say.
We had legally had to give those
Yeah,
people those.
no, I
RIFs.
totally get that.
So
I
we have the
totally get that.
options of either giving them a contract after, if we find some other way to move the money. Or saying, okay, we do actually have to let you go.
I get that.
We have that
But-
option after.
But what the narrative that's being told to us has been said, it was just issued. These RIFs only need to happen if the budget fails, but that is not true.
Okay.
Because if the budget fails, can't we reallocate it and not do the RIF? So why are we
I don't
saying
think
the RIFs
anybody said we
need-
need to do the RIFs.
Yes, they have.
Yes.
Yes, they absolutely have.
No,
It's been issued. Yes, it's in writing, exactly. Patrick had said it's in writing that the RIFs need to they only need to happen if the budget fails.
Well, there will be some need to RIF people if the budget fails, because when we looked at all the different scenarios to get to the April 16th vote, there were levels of things that we could choose. And anything below what we chose, below getting us to the highest tax rate of 9.9%, once we step below that, there are RIFs required. And I think that's what was meant. Not that we had to RIF everybody who was given a notice, but we're then going to step beyond just being able to do kind of the temporary things that we're doing now. We had to then start making real systematic structural changes, and that was going to require some RIFs. So I think that's what was meant, not that as soon as the budget fails, everybody who's got a notice is suddenly out of. Is that fair statement.
I mean, that would be really, really great to make sure that that's truly understood, because every narrative that I've heard from teachers, from parents, from everyone, is that this will happen if the budget fails, and that we have the option to either pass it and save the teachers, or they fail and they lose their jobs, and that there's no other choice. So I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I-
that's not completely true, because the budget becomes level funded when it doesn't pass, is that correct?
If it doesn't
No.
pass at all.
No, so as Steve was saying, if the budget doesn't pass on the 16th, the board has to come back and say, okay, that budget didn't pass. What's the new budget target that we want to bring forward? Maybe that's level spending, but maybe it's somewhere between level spending and the April 16th budget that's going out. So that alone could change the number of RIFs that might be needed, and we could talk about different ways to find the savings. So there's a lot of options, but basically this process we just engaged in to bring the April 16th vote forward starts all over again, including picking a new date to vote.
So. Can I? I don't want. Anyways, I'm looking at the pie here. So 46, wait a minute, 26% is teaching staff. That's why I asked, how many teachers, what type of teaching staff? Then you have here, I think the voters need to know this, that there's almost 18% other school staff. So I think we need to know that, what the difference is. Does that include guidance counselors as teaching staff? Or does it include other school staff? Guidance counselors and other people like that are usually on the same contract as teachers unless they have an extended contract.
So I have
So then we look at one other thing here. We look at other central office staff. What does that mean?
Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
I think what we were trying to do is allow questions on Mike's presentation as he was giving it. We were trying to have questions on Mike's presentation as he was giving it.
Wow.
And then we were going to do I think a full Q&A after. I think we want to make sure Mike gets through his presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, you're okay.
If you had a specific question about one of his points, feel free to
I
stop.
think all this is critical to move forward.
Oh, I understand now. I understand. I'm just trying to make sure Mike gets through his presentation.
Should we?
There was another question, or did you have a question?
It's Pam Marsh again from New Haven. I hate to interrupt this, but another slide back, you took out $160,000 from a elementary ACP program. And what I wondered was that program designed to stop the disruptions in the elementary schools? And if so, are we really saving money by taking that out?
So that was, so we have been operating a high school and middle school ACP, which is sort of a collaborative within Addison County,
What's ACP mean?
Addison Consortium Project. So it's a collaborative, sort of alternative programming that we work together as an Addison County. So Addison Northwest, Addison Central, and MAUSD to provide certain programming for students. So there was talk about possibly expanding that to provide elementary level services. So we put money in the budget to sort of earmark the possibility of doing so. Since then, the programming has evolved, and that Addison Consortium project isn't going to run next year. So having that money there isn't. So the additional funds came from those other savings from ACP, but that elementary funding also came out.
So the students currently in ACP will be going back to their home schools?
There's a variety of things happening. So it's a student by student basis. It's not the same thing for every student is happening.
Can you click back on the presentation maybe? I don't know. There we go, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, so here we are. This is the sort of exhaustive list. Again, these are all of the specific reductions that were made between the initial, I should talk into this, sorry. Not used to that. between the initial proposed budget and the revised budget. Maybe as a summary, this slide sort of gets at that. The revised budget, the budget that we're asking the community to vote on next Tuesday, essentially, as our initial budget, simply attempts to maintain service provided last year. There's no additions, right? It's a commitment that we made last year that we're trying to maintain again this year. To be very clear, if it's passed, it wouldn't necessitate any reduction in force, right? All of the changes that you saw on the previous slide are the extent of the reductions that are required to reach the new budget target that's proposed in this revised budget. The revised budget will substantially reduce the anticipated property tax increase. I'll show you numbers on the next slide. But again, we heard loud and clear that the first proposed budget was too much. And so while trying to maintain those services, we've attempted to come back with a revised budget that at least mitigates some of that property tax increase. And again, in full disclosure, it does so. It mitigates that cost increase while maintaining services, at least in part through short-term means, right? Use of education reserve funds, perhaps reduction to construction services. What does this look like in terms of numbers? The first column is the failed budget vote. Those numbers for total expenses, the revenue, education spending, so on and so forth. The column in blue are the corresponding numbers for the budget that you'll be voting on next week. And then that third column is the change. So essentially that list of all of those differences between the two budgets results in about a little over $1 million of less spending. It results in about $300,000 of increased revenue. This is accounting. We have to count the money that we pull from the education reserve fund as revenue, as opposed to a reduction in expenses. We're still spending the money. We're just paying for it, not through taxes, but through the education reserve fund. So that's why you see that increase in revenue. Fundamentally, what this results is in an overall reduction of about $1.3 million in education spending between the failed budget and the revised budget. And this ultimately is a reduction of close to $700 in spending per approval count with the weighting formula.
We have a hand up on Zoom, I guess. We just can't see it because of the presentation mode. So if you're on Zoom and you have a question, if you could unmute yourself.
Can they hear you?
I hope so.
And do you need to get that message?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
You had a question.
Yes, my name is David, and I apologize. I'm late to the meeting. I've been here for the last 20 minutes or so, but I was busy working, trying to make enough money to earn my money for confiscatory taxes. Is this Mr. Reen who's basically running the show tonight?
It's the MAUSD School Board, MAUSD School Board.
Yeah, okay. So look there's been a lot of talk in the weeds tonight. I'm just going to present the information that I know at a high level. And that's the statistics that I've been able to pull from the data from the MAUSD website. Enrollment from, hello?
Sorry, is this a question related to what we're presenting right now, or is this something we might be able to answer after this presentation is over?
No, this is pertinent to tonight's discussion. Enrollment from 2019 to 2024 has decreased 216 students, or approximately 16%. Expenses.
Sorry. I don't want to be rude. I do want to hear what your comment is, but I'm wondering if you might allow us to finish this budget presentation and then we can have this question and answer forum at the end. We have about 5 to 10 minutes left in this budget.
I apologize for trying to present some facts. The facts I'm trying to present is enrollment has gone down and expenses have gone up over the last 5 years precipitously. Enrollment has gone down 16% over 5 years. Expenses have gone up 20%, diametrically opposed. This is a malfeasance of administrative capacity. What the hell is going on? This is not some new news tonight that we see that expenses. How can I express this? You got this all wrong. You got this all wrong, guys. Your enrollment has gone down, your product has gone down, but your expenses have gone up. How do you explain that? How do you expect me to pay for that mistake?
We have some information in this budget presentation that might help answer some of those questions for you.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
It's not to dismiss what you're saying, because what you're saying is important, but we just have some of that covered in this presentation that might help explain some of those external factors and internal factors.
You're
So-
you're obfuscating. It's fundamental. Expenses have gone up, enrollment has gone down. And you're asking us to pay for the difference, and I resent it.
Some of us here would like to hear the budget presentation, so we know what we're voting on, and we can hear those comments later.
Well, let me just close in saying, you're asking us to pay for malfeasance over the last 5 years. This has been a Mack train coming at you, and you have done nothing that I can see to reduce your expenses, to accommodate the reduction in the product. The product is enrollment, and it's gone down and down and down. The other thing that is very important is this is
Point of order.
Yeah.
Point of order.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is, we opened the floor so that we could have questions and answers regarding the specific slideshow that's being presented. And we welcome your comments following the slideshow. Thank you, David.
I'd be happy to remain on the line until the slideshow is done.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sorry, Mike.
No, it's okay. Okay, perfect. So, just to kind of pick up where we left off, this is a slide that sort of directly shows, in terms of dollars and cents, what kind of changes were made between the initial failed budget vote and the revised budget vote. Again, it's a pretty substantial reduction in spending, in education spending, that ultimately results in about a 5 or 6% reduction. Sorry, we should do this like this, about $700 reduction in the per pupil spending between the two budgets. From some really good community feedback last week and continuing on, there were some requests to compare this revised budget to the previous year's budget directly. So that's what this final column will show you. So the revised budget is ultimately about a $2 million increase in spending from the previous year's budget, which is about 6%. Ultimately, though, in terms of education spending, when you offset the increased revenue that's occurring year over year, we're spending about 3% more in this revised budget than we did last year. Right, again, just to point out, at statewide costs in terms of these property values, they're talking, or property taxes, they're talking 18 to 19% increases. It's not exactly apples to apples, but it's not out of the ballpark. This revised budget is a 3% year over year increase. And you might think about comparing what you pay at the grocery store or to gas year over year. And I'm no economist, but I'm pretty sure it's at or above 3%, just as some context. In the end, that's a reduction from the previous year of about 5.78% per pupil spending. So we've heard the concerns. We're attempting to find some sort of middle ground where we maintain services but reduce the tax burden, and that led to this revised budget that's being asked to be voted on next week. What does this mean? I said we've tried to reduce the tax burden. What does it mean? Now, bottom line, you can see the projected tax rate in the far right column for each of our towns, with, of course, the Starksboro caveat of still changing based on the appraisal. But none of the three towns are expected to see all four towns, I suppose you could say, are expecting to see less than a 10% increase in their property tax associated with the revised budget. Before, for every $100,000 of assessed value in the failed budget, we were seeing increases of about $240 to $290. The revised budget puts that somewhere in the ballpark of $135 to $184 per $100,000. So this is a decrease of a bit over $100 per $100,000 between the initial proposed budget and the revised budget. So that's what these cuts, with the drawing from the Education Reserve Fund, reducing the construction services line, ultimately does to the property taxes that we're projecting. Okay. And again, as the slide points out, we get these property taxes less than 10%. We maintain student services, and all of that is done without any RIFs. Yeah.
The 3 positions that were open, how did those become open? Is that attrition, people leaving? And by not filling those, how do you not consider that a RIF, a reduction in force, by not having 3 positions filled?
So there's actually a combination of ways that those positions became vacant, but that it's attrition, it's different ways that attrition took place, but they're all attrition that we're taking advantage of. And the way we've interpreted the idea of reduction in force, that is when we have to issue notice to someone who is currently employed that wishes to remain employed, and we notify them that we don't have a position to offer them. We see that different than not filling a position. And we've had that legal opinion on that as well.
Do the students feel that way, to lose 3 teachers and not have those positions filled? Is that equal services to the students to not have the teachers that they have now?
We asked that question, we asked that question about the impact to students, and the positions that are on that list that that are part of this budget do not have the impact that would make it a negative impact, I should say. It wouldn't have the same impact, so they're at the high school, right? They're high school level positions, not in the elementary school, and we still meet all the requirements for the classes that they're leaving. And so we're still filling all that.
Okay, so hopefully, it's been a kind of winding road this time as opposed to last week, but I appreciate that. We have a little bit better sense of kind of what the aspirations of the board were in terms of the initial budget and now the revised budget. And so hopefully that's cleared up some of the uncertainty surrounding what the reductions in services that may or may not be provided, the role of RIFs, and ultimately the role of taxes. I think we'd be remiss not to talk about future directions, at least briefly. So immediate future, today, we're here, you have this presentation, and we're going to continue to hear feedback from you all and continue discussion about the budget. Next week is the vote on the revised budget, right? Get out, tell your friends, get everybody out to vote, right? We need to hear voices either way, frankly. If voters approve the adopted revised budget, I'm sorry, if you approve it, that adopts this budget. That's our budget for next year moving forward. If voters reject the revised budget, as we've heard tonight, we'd have to restart this process again, coming up with a new proposed budget from the board to be voted on another date. And it would likely necessitate significant costs to the budget and district services. That's the sense that we get in terms of the amount of cuts that would be required and where those levers might be. What happens in the not so distant future? Again, I want to center this again around the broader context of the state, right? Whatever concerns, and they may be very valid, frankly, we may have with the total amount that's being spent or even the allocation that's being spent within this district, those concerns are local, undoubtedly, but they're occurring in the broader context where every district across the state is facing these same challenges. And again, I just keep pointing that out, which is to say, that's not to say that there isn't significant room for improvement within our district. But I also don't think that it's a fair proposition to think that we got to this place because of just what we chose to do as a district. Right? I've been here for a year and I don't have that sense at all. You're on the board for a year, right? It's unlikely that every district in the state somehow magically got to the same place by making exactly the same choices, right? Instead, there are external factors that are driving a lot of this, and we need to think about how we can control what we control locally to try to offset some of those pressures. We do have some control over our local spending, right? We can influence based on the budget that we propose, the budget that you vote on, that per pupil spending. Again, here we're going to see a 6% almost decrease from last year and still see that increase in your property tax that's just less than 10%, right? So while we do have some control, we clearly don't have huge control or total control. What does this say to me? What does this say to the board? I think that it's really clear that we as a board and the administration and you all as a community have to continuously engage with one another. We have to work on a long-term solution to school financing within our district and perhaps beyond the borders of our district. We want to be able to mitigate costs, but we also want to provide the services to our students that they deserve, that we as a community value. And my sense is that that's a long-term project. I don't see that changing before the 16th, and it's going to be really difficult between the 16th and whatever that final deadline is to make the kinds of profound reorganization to the district that at least I personally think are necessary, right, to be able to accomplish both of those goals. We have one more elephant in the room that I don't want to ignore fully by any means, which is there was a second vote in alongside the initial proposed budget, which was for a long-term solution for the central office. We too need to work together to figure out what that long-term solution is. There were a variety of questions last week about kind of where the money that was allocated potentially for that is. Again, that money was already part of the construction services. So part of that would still remain as a potential buffer to figure out what that solution might be, though it also might be worth thinking about the $250,000 that the revised budget has been removed as playing into that as well. I think that's all I have as sort of an overview, right? So again, if I can give one last summary, right? Statewide costs are going up. We want to maintain services. We attempted to do so with the initial budget, but perhaps the cost was too much to swallow. We've attempted to go back to the well with maybe a somewhat short-term solution that maintains those services, but does so at a lower bottom line. But that gets us to the future where collectively we need to work together to figure out how do we maintain and enhance this district the way that I think so many of us care about, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't. And so that's where my optimism comes in, that we may be able to come up with real solutions moving forward. So, thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
The board ready to open the floor for sort of a question and answer public comment section now. Okay. So we're gonna open the floor for public comment. This is sort of a question and answer section. So now we will do our best to respond to you. If we need more information or you do, we can always email you what we have available to answer your questions. Okay. Whenever you're ready.
Can we just talk for a minute about what Vicky needs?
Oh,
I think it's
sure.
important we may not be able to answer every question that comes up,
Sure.
but it's important to capture them.
Yep.
So maybe even if you've said it once, if you can just state your name and make sure we capture the question for the minutes so we can follow up.
Yeah, so, sorry. So can I ask you then, when you're asking your question, can you ask a question without stating the reasons behind your question? So just ask a question without saying, well, I'm asking this question because I have this information, and then it tends not to be a question and it's more about your statement. It's very hard to record the actual question that you have that you want them to answer. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Makes it easier for everyone to hear. Thank you.
Hey, Fred Schroeder again. Hey, who are the voters in this town? It's obviously not this, I mean, yeah, a small portion of the town is here. The people that are gonna vote are not in this room. Some of them aren't connected to the internet, don't know what's going on. So who is your customer? And what is your increase that's really acceptable to them? I mean, what's the average increase in taxes per year? Can anyone tell me that? Like before all this happened?
We do
What's the
have that
average?
information.
Yeah, look it up.
So what is acceptable to Bill and Martha sitting over at the kitchen table and wondering, boy, in their 80s, are we gonna be able to pay our taxes this year? Because my social security is not paying me. Because my social security is not going up. My retirement's not that much. So where am I gonna come up with the money? So what is your goal to increase taxes that's really gonna pass? Have you thought about that? What's a number that people are gonna say, yeah? Because I don't think people are gonna listen to all these numbers that are thrown out. It's confusing as heck, but they wanna know what their taxes are gonna go up every year. And if you come up with that number and you think that's gonna be their number, that they're gonna say yes. So work backwards from that. What do we need to cut in order to get that number? That's all I want to say.
Maybe I'll just weigh in. I mean, this revised budget is sort of a product of that, right? Where we didn't come in and ask the administration, these are the cuts we want to see. We said the number was too high. give us scenarios at different levels. And then we tried to find one that seemed to help maintain services, but also was a low enough one that we were optimistic would be supported by the community, knowing that it's bigger than most years in the past, undoubtedly. But also knowing that our number relative to other budgets in the state is half, less than half in some places, of the increase that others in the state have stomached, right? And so you're right, it's a tightrope for us, right? Where we have to take into account historical changes, but we also have to take into account this unprecedented year where everybody's taxes throughout the state are facing this.
Mike, Bristol, Bud Towns is not South Burlington, it's not, you don't have a tax base that they do. Yeah, we don't have that.
Sure, although 2/3 of.
And we don't have the app, we don't have the app. Like, like other towns in the state. Yeah. This is fine.
No, but there are towns that border New Hampshire, for example, so their elementary schools in Vermont and they send their kids over to New Hampshire for high school, and they were looking at 50 to 80% tax increase. So, I mean, and they are pretty comparable, they're a little bit smaller, but I mean, it's across everywhere. So there are districts where with the same competing ideas, right? And so we're, like Mike said, we're really walking this line of how do we make sure all of the asks that are here today are being met and that your pocket isn't draining, right? It's a really difficult situation. Do you have those?
I do, yeah. So over the past 5 years, the tax rate increases after CLA have been anywhere from about flat to a little over 8.25%, depending on the town and the year and all the factors that we talked about.
Yes.
I think it's important for you to know that citizen population that you referred to was a voice that was loud and clear here during all of this discussion. And we are very concerned about all of our neighbors as well as all of the children who may be affected by an understaffed classroom with many special needs. What we do need to be clear about is that our hands are tied, and Mike's presentation did this beautifully. Our hands are tied by what Montpelier is doing and what they don't do. You know, we're doing the absolute best that we can to bring you what might be palatable. Is it affordable? It may not very well be, but that's what we have to work with. So not only should your voice be heard here, and it is heard and it's represented in every town, you need to talk to your state representatives and your state senators, because we can't continue to do this. We're the ones that are taking the heat for what's happening in Montpelier. Their indecisiveness or their lack of response to their own voters is what's putting us, all of us, in this position right now.
And there are some factors, I think we've talked about the last couple of meetings, that are new to this budget cycle. Why are we seeing 15 to 18% this year when we listen to Patrick's list of, you know, where we've been the last 5 or 6 years? Why is this suddenly happening? Well, you've all experienced what's happened with the COVID inflation. You all, you know, things have just gone through the roof. People were asking why the construction budget for the lobby went over budget. Well, it happened during COVID. And if anybody paid any attention to what happened in construction during COVID, it went crazy. And we tried to rein it in as much as we could, but the supply chain broke down, all sorts of things happened. Well, the teachers are feeling the pinch on that as well. The healthcare workers are feeling the pinch on that, and they've all come back to our boards, on the health boards and our board, with requests for double-digit pay increases. And that's the same as you going to the grocery store and paying double-digit increases on your bread and whatever else. So we're seeing that as an impact on this budget. And when that happens statewide, even if we cut as much as we can, even if we level fund from last year and send out all the RIF notices, we still get hit with the increases that happen statewide because the state pays for it on a statewide basis. The yield gets adjusted based upon how much money they need to raise, based upon everybody's budget. And when everybody's budget's hit with these double-digit increases, we have to pay for it, even if we're being extremely frugal on our end. Shauna?
Just a
clarify about the cost for the lobby project. You said it happened during COVID. I know the major over budget stuff happened in 2023 school year, so that's what is that the same project? Is this a different project that went significantly over budget? Or, I mean.
No, I mean, those issues carried over. We actually had to carry the cost over to the next school year and handle them in the next capital funding budget,
Okay,
so,
okay, so it's just a cumulative like of over several years.
yeah, well.
Our year end is in June, so the construction was bridged over those 2 years. You saw the bulk of the expense in 23.
Yeah.
Even though we broke ground in 22.
Okay, got it. Okay, that makes more sense. Now, my other question is just, I've heard, obviously, I'm Shauna from Bristol, by the way, sorry, that obviously there's a lot of discrepancies between like, if it's the tax rate or if it's where it's being allocated. Is it possible to get a vote from people to say, what is it that they actually do have a problem with? Because obviously that's two totally different things. If I don't want to have to pay higher taxes, but if I have to, I'd rather it go for the things I want it to go to. Is it possible to find out from the voters so that you maybe could make some changes before then? What is it that is the problem? Is it the amount, the tax rate we can't control, or is it where it's going to? So that you have an idea of, is that possible to find out from people before
the 16th?
Yeah. Like, because, I mean, I'm curious, I want to know, what is it that people have the issue with? Is it where it's going or the total amount?
Yeah, I think before the 16th, the budget is warned, the ballot is set, right? So that vote will happen. Gathering input as to what people are feeling like, total versus allocation, is something that's ongoing, something we've been asking for, right? You guys coming and engaging tonight is one of those opportunities for us to learn about that. Whether or not it'll impact the 16th vote is hard to say because that's already set. I think people have set their minds on what sort of information they need in order to feel educated enough to make the choice they want to make on that vote. But going forward, certainly, we have lots of time, well, not lots of time, but time to engage more thoroughly in that understanding, and is something we've been talking about as a board, trying to get really good at, so that we're not having these miscommunications and these back and forths that are leading to voted down budgets, or these really difficult conversations that are hard to navigate in the structure we have as a board and these forums that we have to participate with you in. It makes it hard. So yes and no. Yeah.
Would there be negative consequences to pushing out the vote, saying, no, we're not gonna do it on the 16th, we're changing our mind, we're gonna push it out? Is that possible, or is there negative consequences for that?
I'm not entirely sure what the legal process is to do that, to be honest with you. I don't know if you know.
I don't think we can pull the vote back now. It's warned, it is official.
I saw Kevin's hand up first.
Kevin Bristol, I just kind of touch on Aaron, you know, some of the misnomers that are getting out there, and I apologize, I don't come to these meetings, but, you know, that it was written, I look on Front Porch Forum, that we need to cut 17 teachers if this budget fails, not you guys have now said, well, maybe it'll come from someplace else. And the gentleman over there has said it not once, but last week he said it at our meeting, he said the teachers are in for a 10-12% raise. I wonder if you could expand on that, clarify that for me. I wasn't aware they were going in for a 10% raise.
So.
They're not.
But you just said it twice. You said it last week and you
Yeah.
said it again tonight.
So I'm saying statewide, teacher contracts are being settled. If you look at Virginia's
I'm
contract
not
last
looking at
year.
it. I'm looking at it right here.
I understand, but we're paying for Virginia's 13.8, which is my point. My point is when Virginia settles for 13.8 and somebody else settles for 11 and somebody else settles for 12, even if we don't approve those contract amounts, which we're negotiating part of now and we'll be negotiating in the fall, we still get hit with those impacts.
Well, we have it. And I just saying, I'm just making the point that the need that Patrick wrote, and then you're saying we are going to, it's misleading because
Are going
that
to?
hasn't happened yet. you're misleading people, and I just think, for clarity, they're not getting a 10% raises next year, and you've said it twice.
I did not say that our staff is getting a 10% raise.
You said the teachers are gonna get a 10%
No, I
raise.
said, I did
Double
not say
digit
that.
increase, is that not
I did not
10%?
say that.
Okay.
That they're asking.
They're asking.
But that.
So what I would love to clarify is that there's not even negotiations happening at this moment,
That's right.
right? So our
Professional staff.
professional staff, because Hannaford is right now, and we do pay him there, right? And so this is a general landscape where we're kind of balancing the state level and the local level, and both affect what we're paying. And when we say a need, I think the need word is appropriate and need to consider. And what I think is really important to kind of clarify is that if this were to fail, there would be a really much more thorough, much more detailed, much more specific list of what cuts would be made and the whys. I think we started on it a little bit, right? Like I personally, the thing that I'm holding on to right now is that, we haven't been able to fill paraprofessional positions, and that's not an area that we can afford to lose right now, right? So like that feels really good. That's a great thing to hear. And I think we could share that sentiment. So there would be, and even now, it's working to, like, there are reasons. It wasn't just an arbitrary list of cuts, no matter where they would be coming from, whether it's the construction fund or from the, I just heard at the state level that they're considering pulling back district's reserve funds that we've set aside, like a pullback up to compensate at the state level. That is like one of the many things that is getting considered. So what other districts do and don't do, how much we've saved or haven't saved, whether the federal government is gonna come in and offer some construction funding, and if you have enough saved, you can match it and get a lot out of it. There is an overwhelming number of factors. So when we talk and something called a BOCES, right? So this is like a situation where there could be if Addison County is one district, there could be a single entity within the district that provides, because the state would like all of our teachers trained on this very long list of things. And they are requiring it and they want it done. So they might be, we have coaches and people who are trying to implement this work. And yes, all hands on deck, our system's getting smaller and smaller. Yes, it's huge to just have, everybody is doing everything they can in every way. But it might end up being that they create this organization that will kind of go out and be a centralized service to schools. The thing that's scary about that is we won't have any control. Well, you kind of a fee for service. We won't control how much they pay their superintendent of their BOCES, right? So it could also get kind of out of control there with the spending, still be having the coaching service, but it could be from this other organization that possibly could save, I don't know. There's so many things right now that are happening. And so I think that's why it's overwhelming and confusing. And so even just to look at and who knows, none of those things maybe happen. Maybe they do, right? Like, so maybe we don't have coaches in our personal district and we're sharing them countywide or regionally or statewide. Like, they even like thoughts about having a certain organization that they have really specifically for their own, that you have to use this certain person to get approval to do construction projects. And our roof needs to get done and we didn't pass a bond and it costs a lot of money and we've had flooding in the schools. And that also matters to student safety,
right? And then if you do it, and then you can get some energy funds by putting solar panels on top to cover some of it. And there's a state law about drainage and our roof is so large. And it's like, there's so much. And I really appreciate Kathy saying that the community voice is being heard. There's a lot of work from a lot of different perspectives around the table that I do feel are actually diverse enough to cover what the various community members are feeling. But by far, what our kids are experiencing when they're walking into the classroom is the most important thing. I mean, that's where our hearts are. And the families need to provide for them the other 2/3 of their year when they're at home over the summers, over the breaks. The families need to be able to have the funds that they need to take care of them and plan their futures together too. So, I mean, I do hope that nobody walks away from here, even if, I mean, we don't answer every question that has been heard, that has been said tonight. I do hope that you feel heard, because it's a lot of passion around the table and in administration and in our schools. It's everywhere. It's every person who works in the district is really passionate and is listening and hearing.
Pam Marsh, can you tell us where the 17 RIFs have been, notices have been, like how many in the high school, how many in the elementary schools? So that we have some understanding of what that impact may be.
Yeah, communication went out today on Front Porch Forum, but I'll pull that up.
Have kids.
Well, Patrick's looking for that. I think one of the other questions that came up earlier was why aren't we able to fill these positions? It's not because we're not offering competitive wages and benefits. We all know what the workforce is. I mean, I teach in Chittenden County and there's not a school in Chittenden County that is fully staffed. There's just not a workforce to draw from.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was very, very beautiful. And I want to say, Shauna, again, thank you to the board for everything that you guys do. And it's hard because these are very heated conversations, but I've looked over so many board minutes for so many years and look, and it seems always like there's questions asked that don't get answered. That you guys ask questions that don't get answered, and again and again and again. So I look through, because I'm looking, okay, gotta go to the next one to find the answer, but it never comes. So how do we not feel uninformed when we can't find the answers, when we are scouring every single resource that you guys have available for us? When we attend meetings and we still just hear no answers, things get tabled. But more so, again, you look and you look and you look and nothing's there. So I would ask if you could please, if whatever resources that you do, instead of emailing them to individuals who ask, post them on the website. Because if one person has a question, so many other people are gonna have the same question. So just post them, make them available. Sometimes the links in the monitoring reports or in the board minutes don't work. They don't go anywhere. The information is no longer available. So that's why we're asking questions, because we don't know the answers and no one makes it available to us. One question I do have is, who decides the salaries for everyone? Does the school board, I know the school board gets a recommendation, but does the school board decide everyone's salary, or is that done?
So,
No, I'm not talking about the teachers, I'm talking about everyone that's not under a bargaining agreement. I'm talking about staff that are not required to get paid a certain amount. Who decides their salaries?
do you have a specific one you're asking about?
Well, I know, okay, the superintendent, you guys know, you guys are the
Yeah.
ones that decide his salary.
Correct.
I understand.
Yes.
But does Patrick decide on everyone else's salary? Or do you guys actually get to choose what their salaries are?
The board approves every salary,
The board approves everyone's salary?
yes.
Okay,
And the general approach with some exceptions, if something needs to be corrected for something, the general approach is sort of other professional staff follow whatever the teacher negotiated new money is, and other support staff that are not covered by the collective bargaining agreement tend to follow suit with what the support staff collective bargaining is. So try to sort of parallel what's happening for similar positions around the district.
okay, what about like similar, I mean, like directors of everything, you know, is everyone's pay like across the state, are all superintendents getting paid as much as we're paying? Are the directors all getting paid? That I wasn't clear, the assistant superintendent, it doesn't have a specific line item for the assistant superintendent. There's a principal and assistant principals, but there's nothing separate for the assistant superintendent, so I'm not sure, is that included? Is the assistant superintendent salary included in the superintendent salary listed on the budget? Or is that just?
I'd have to know more about what specifically, what document you're referencing, which line you're
The
referencing.
Levinson format that has been distributed to everyone, it says superintendent for $221,000.
Lloyd has that.
Some of the positions in our budget that you're looking at that show zeros are funded through grants that aren't in our budget. Right? So grants, IDEA, Medicare, you'll see a number of positions that are in there that might only be a 0.4 or a 0.6 or a 0, because we pay for those out of the federal or the state grant that is overseeing umbrella for that. With our assistant superintendent, a portion of that salary is paid for that way. Does that help?
I mean, that does help, but my last question specifically is on this Levinson format, other central office staff, it says superintendent, 221,000. Keep in mind, salaries are public record. So is 221,000 your compensation, Patrick, or does it involve other professionals or other staff?
So that reflects total compensation, not just salary.
So your salary does listed 221,000, you're not in shared healthcare costs for healthcare or any other benefits?
That's all inclusive.
That's all inclusive.
So.
So that's total compensation.
That is
So
with the
then what's
healthcare.
shared Healthcare cost then, is that, I mean, is total compensation for everyone listed in all of their categories?
In that report that you're looking at, it reflects total compensation. To give you a sense of what those numbers might be, for medical insurance for a single person is $9,000.
Yes.
Per year. For a family is $40,000 per year. So if you take those numbers, assuming a family rate, take $40,000 plus all of the other benefits
Yes.
that are included.
Yeah.
So to use that as a salary and compare it to, well, say our governor is disingenuous at best, because it's comparing an apple and an orange.
But then what's the shared healthcare cost column for? If that shared healthcare cost is, I'm sorry, does someone have it? It says $640,000 or something? What does it say? on the
In
Levinson form?
addition, I'm sorry, in addition to the medical insurance, we have a high deductible plan with a $4,250 deductible that the district pays first dollars on. And we take that total number, use a discount rate of 70% of that we budget for in a year. So that's what that number is that you're looking at. It's the shared health cost for the deductible that is negotiated statewide. And that's a separate line item, because we can't really allocate it to any one person until we get to the end of the year. At times, you'll see those numbers allocate to specific schools once we can allocate who we spent the money on as we report to the state.
Got it.
Does
Got it.
that
So
help?
That does make sense. So basically, right now, the total compensation without the high deductible is 221,000. It obviously then could be more, basically based on anyone's salary, could be more depending on what your total spending is per person. Basically is what you're saying, that this amount isn't necessarily all that the compensation package, a compensation.
The number you're looking at for our superintendent is his total compensation.
Okay. And then, oh, all right. So, again, does that accurately relate to other positions, other superintendents in the state
Yes,
collectively?
yes,
That's a board question.
yes. The last time we did negotiations for Patrick's salary, we did comparisons with people that were close to us and people across the state. He's in the median range of superintendent salaries. He's not overpaid, he's not underpaid, he's right in the middle.
All right, thank you. Linda Brown, could I use the mic?
Totally.
I couldn't hear
Yeah.
half of what was said. Other people. So it seems that, is this on?
There you go. Yep, it's on.
Is it on?
Mhm.
It seems that, one of the costs that keeps on every year increasing 17% for health insurance. No one seems alarmed at that and seems like they want to get to the root of that. And yeah, I was a teacher and I heard the same kinds of arguments being laid out. And so many of those costs are just, you can't touch them. They're there. That's what healthcare costs are. And yet, what did you say for a family of four?
$40,000 for a family plan.
$40,000 multiplied by the number of professional staff that we have.
4.4 million for our district,
Yeah, it seems like.
teachers only.
It seems like the schools in our district, in our state, as well as other states, should be up in arms about those costs. And
I
should
can
be-
assure you that we are up in arms.
Yeah.
And it's negotiated on a state level outside of our control. We
Right,
receive a note that says, here's the number.
right. I understand that. I understand that. And yet people don't vote for a one-payer system that would solve some of these problems because it would remove those costs. The second thing that I want to say is that what I heard particularly in the beginning of this whole conversation was people being concerned about their children's education, that there were a lot of times where children had to evacuate their rooms and learning was disrupted. And that's with the present staffing. So that seems like it's a whole different issue that's going to have to be addressed, because in addition to what it is right now and those problems, even if staffing remain the same, you're still going to have those problems. And what I heard was a consortium that usually deals or has been dealing with some of those children that have challenges is dissolving. So there's not going to be that support. Counseling service, they haven't been able to fill their multitude of positions that would be supporting schools and would be in there. So it seems like we have to recognize all of those factors and deal with the behaviors. That has to be a whole different conversation than what this meeting is all about.
Riley Sullivan on Zoom. We cannot hear you if you're speaking. No, I still can't hear you, Riley. There you
Oh,
are.
no.
There you are.
Oh,
Got
okay.
you.
Sorry. Thank you. Just a quick question, clarifying question regarding the presentation. You mentioned that during this budgetary discussion, nothing under contract to anybody or anything was really up for discussion. I was wondering if or when the meeting for that would be taking place.
Yeah, I think Riley, I'll jump in and maybe try to clarify some of my words. And I'm sorry if I'm steered you astray. I think the idea is that the budget process is a really long process, right? So we started this last fall, we had open meetings, we had presentations to try to solicit that feedback. And I think, we tend to envision that if we're gonna make substantive changes to the way the district allocates money across the various pools, that has to be a prolonged process to make sure that we get it right. And so I think we're envisioning, I serve on the Finance and Facilities Subcommittee, right? I think we're envisioning opportunities throughout next year and beyond to have these really challenging conversations with the community so that that can impact future budgets. My sense is that to be able to incorporate that feedback in a sort of systematic and meaningful way on this sort of time frame is going to be really difficult, if not impossible, because as you've already heard, even just tonight, there are a lot of different voices with a lot of different visions for how the district should best support its students, right? And so to really hear those fully and to try to make a sense that kind of captures the will of the community as a whole, I think is going to be a process that is going to play out over the ensuing year, as opposed to ensuing weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I wanted to just clarify that regarding this budgetary discussion, that was really not taking place. That was very clear. But yes, going forward, and I think you answered it just fine. So yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Good.
Wendy on Zoom. Sorry. All right, Wendy, we'll come back to you.
I think Wendy might not realize she's muted.
We'll come back to her. Sorry, I've forgotten your first name, the gentleman on Zoom.
David.
Danny?
David.
David?
Yeah, Tronny phone. This is a nickname my grandkids gave me. I'm sorry.
You don't know if it's appropriate or not, so.
Oh, so listen, I'm trying to approach this at the macro level. It seems like this evening's discussions, we've been in the weeds all night. At a macro level, Vermont has a geriatric population and we seem to be growing older by the day. That's a tough situation for a school that's trying to attract young families. What I tried to express in my earlier conversation, and I apologize if I was out of order and perhaps presenting a material that was not at the right time of the discussion. But look, enrollment has gone down over 5 years. It's not anything new. It's gone down 16%, and except for my data, all but 1 year in 2022, it went up 21 students, but otherwise it's gone down over the years, 216 students. Expenses have gone up dramatically. How do we attract new families to come to, I'm in New Haven, so I'm going to speak locally. How do we attract new families to consider moving into New Haven when two things are happening? One, the property taxes are high. Now, you said that they're high across the state. Well, either we accept that and accept our doom that we're never going to attract a young family because we're unaffordable, the housing costs are high, and real estate taxes are high. That's a death spiral right there. Who's going to come to New Haven with young family? Who's going to come to New Haven with a family that's going to enroll students in the school district? I asked the question, where do you see ourselves 5 years from now? Perhaps that's the most poignant question. Where do you see the budget? Where do you see yourselves 5 years from now? Are we going to increase 10% each year? Are we going to decrease enrollment each year? How are we going to improve the perceived rating of the MAUSD? I mean, I look at some of the real estate websites, as do most families looking for homes, and I'm sure you're aware that MAUSD is just about middle of the road, 5 out of 10. That's not great, guys. That's not great. If you're a young family and saying, where are we going to move to? Where are we going to get a best education for our kids? 5 out of 10 ain't cutting it. So I'll cut it off there because it's sort of a doom and gloom situation. How do we get out of this death spiral of increasing costs, mediocre scoring on our school system, and somewhat from what I'm hearing tonight, a lot of these costs are out of our hands. They're coming from Montpelier.
Hi, I'm gonna speak up. I'm Daniela Sutherland. I'm new to the board and I'm also a young family who just relocated. And so I'd say the first thing is there's no housing and the housing that's here is really expensive. So that would be one of the key problems that I know Montpelier is trying to address. But the bigger issue about what you're talking about is David, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so David, I work with small and rural schools and districts around New England. And the problem that you're talking about in New Haven is happening across New Hampshire and Maine. And it's an issue that needs more of a state level support because these are what we call our graying populations, right? Like families aren't able to afford to move into these communities because the housing costs are so high and the property taxes are so high. So there's a part of this to say what you're talking about goes way beyond even what MAUSD can do. And it's something that I want to be like, could you please call our local representatives and please let them know your concerns because there's a lot of development work that needs to happen. And I'm new to Vermont, so I'm not entirely sure what work is being done here right at this moment. I know more about New Hampshire. The other thing I'd say is please don't look at great schools or the real estate ratings of schools. I have been an educator and I've trained teachers and now I work with principals and superintendents. That is like the biggest load of junk. It is just one of those sites of like, don't go and look at those reviews. I know you want to have meaningful data to look at reviews, but those that are associated with real estate are usually people who are mad. I know just me as an educator, I was so thrilled to be able to move to this district and to these schools. It's just me. I know I'm on the board. I'm not the best representative for everything, but I'd say you're talking about big problems. They're serious and please don't read those ratings because they're garbage. That's it.
And I might just build off of what Daniela was saying, that there is a lot of advocacy at the state level from locals. I personally have presented 3 times this year to the legislature, talking about the challenges, both the state challenges, but how that impacts locally and the weight it puts on local decision makers for things that really are out of control, are out of the local control. So that advocacy is happening and more of it is needed. So individuals reaching out to legislators is helpful and we'll continue to advocate in any way that we can when we're presented with those opportunities. And there are a lot of news stories that are happening. MAUSD has been part of 3 or 4 of those anyway, outside of the Addison Independent. So there's a lot of attention right now, statewide, locally, and nationally on education funding in Vermont and what's happening and what does it look like 5 years from now? And the answer is it can look great and it can look way worse than it does right now. And which of those 2 future realities is ours depends on what we do over the next 5 years at a state level and at a local level.
So my state representative is Jubilee McGill. What, if I get on the phone with her tomorrow, what should I say?
Yeah. Yeah, you just told us, yes. All of that.
And ask her what she's doing to turn this curve in our favor. Because that came up at town meeting in New Haven and she had no answer.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you, this is a death spiral. I've been in business for close to 50 years, and I've seen many companies succeed, and I've seen companies fail. This is not good, guys.
Well, I think as Kim mentioned earlier, I agree with much of what you're saying, David. This is something we've seen coming for a long time. We forecasted this 5 or 6 years ago. We saw this coming. Did a lot of work to try to figure out a way to get around it. Ultimately didn't make any big decisions, didn't really make any of the needed changes to get out in front of it. It's here now and we're working through it the best we can. And now that we're experiencing what we're experiencing, we have to come back to the drawing board and say, all right, so now what do we do with the information that we have in our reality? And how do we shape our future? We're either going to be the architects of our future or it's going to be handed to us. And I think it's in our best interest to be the architects.
Dumb
And that's what
question,
we're talking
dumb
about.
question, dumb question. Can I ask, of our collective funds that are allocated towards education, our real estate taxes are, the majority of them are education funds. How much go to you guys and how much goes to the state? And I'm thinking, who funds UVM? Am I funding UVM?
No, it's 4% of UVM's total budget comes from the state. It's the lowest funded institution, I believe, in the United States, or like one of the bottom three. And it also has rapidly declining enrollment and some of the highest tuition. So don't worry, you're not really paying for UVM either. I work
Good.
there, so you're not paying for
Good.
my salary, I don't think.
Good. All right, that's good. Thank you.
I think I'm hearing from other people in the community, it's been very heavy on Facebook at the moment. There are some real misconceptions about what this current budget, if it passes, what we get, and if it fails, what will happen. And I think it would be in the board's best interest to really lay out, this is what we get for this budget, and ignore this is what happens if we don't, because I think this big, like 17 RIFs and who's going and who's cutting is really convoluting what is happening with this budget. And so I think if the board could have one big overall statement, like here's what we want and here's what we're gonna get for this, I think the public really needs to hear that, because even in this meeting tonight, there was still a lot of confusion on RIFs and people coming and people going and what's being cut and what's not. And I think the people that are left listening, and hopefully they can spread the word on what we're going to get with this budget.
Hey, Erin.
Yeah.
I just have a kind of a follow-up question to that. So, and this is just for curiosity, just as a board member and how best to communicate out to, these are 4 towns. In Mike's presentation, he had the bullet points that said, here's what is different from the budget that was voted down. Was that list of bullet points helpful in just sort of a broad range of understanding the differences? So like, for example, the positions that are fulfilled or have not been fulfilled will not be, we're not going to fill them, that one line as an example. Was that information helpful? Just trying to think of ways to communicate it out, because I know, Alan and I have spoken in the past about how, Front Porch Forum, there's some folks that do pay attention to it, but they don't necessarily, go to the meetings via the link, like just, again, trying to figure out how best to communicate out the information that everybody wants.
It's Amanda from New Haven for the minute taker. The Front Porch Forum that we saw today had a very big discussion on positions being ripped. And that was really heavy, and it used the word need a lot of times in there, which is why I think a lot of people in the audience were very upset that we were being told we didn't say need, but need was probably 5 times in that Front Porch Forum from today. Those bullet points were great. Seeing where we're at now for this year's budget, what failed and what we're asking for in this next round. If we could stop there, I think that would be helpful. But the Front Porch Forum that came out today was all about positions being cut, and I think that was very confusing.
Also, it was really long, so like bullet points, like.
Yes.
I'll take the fall for that RIF discussion going out today. Patrick did ask me if that would add to confusion, and I said possibly, but in the state of being transparent, more information always feels better to me.
I agree.
So I'll take the fall for that being confusing. I apologize. That wasn't the intent. The intent is to give you as much as we can when we have it available, so that you're not left to question other things.
Those of us that have been here for the last 3 meetings, I think we got it, but the people that weren't here, it was overwhelming.
Yeah.
Or upsetting.
Yeah. If you will. Yeah, sure. And we can learn from that and do better. So point noted.
Yeah, well, Amanda, I think, you raise a good point, because I think, to answer your, or to, sort of respond to your point, I mean, the main thing that we are offering or saying or presenting, what are the benefits of this revised budget is that we're maintaining a level service. Now, we're not, removing things from, the program, and we're not removing student support service and that sort of thing. That's a little bit amorphous, I think, in hindsight. Maybe we should say, well, in MAUSD, we have X number of teachers, Y number of, highly successful, musicals and sports teams, and focus more on something maybe a little bit more specific about what the community is getting. And I think maybe we haven't done quite as good a job stating that, and just limiting our, communication to the fact, well, you guys wanted this level of service in the last budget, and we're maintaining that. So.
It might also be helpful for people to realize that our schools are in crisis. We cannot have any more cuts to the services, because the services right now are not sufficient.
Right.
And if there's any way to shuffle money somewhere else in the budget to get more services to the kids, we need it.
Kathy on Zoom. Kathy, are you there?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't get to my mute button. This is Kathy Martel, and it was mentioned that some positions were done with grants, and it's been mentioned in discussions about the extended learning program. Is that all grant funded, or is that also in our budget?
Katrina can work the details. The majority of the expanded learning program is grant funded. Part of the requirements of getting those grant funds is that each year we work to build more and more of the cost of that programming into our general fund. However, the majority of the cost right now is driven by a combination of grant funds and parent contributions. Katrina?
She just
stepped out.
I think that's spot on.
Okay.
Kim on Zoom.
Okay, I'm sitting here in the dark, so I'm not gonna it has gotten dark. So, and I won't keep everybody for very long, but I just wanted to respond to what Amanda was saying about Front Porch Forum. I think everybody in New Haven knows who I am, because I'm a frequent flyer on Front Porch Forum, especially around school issues, and maybe a little bit notorious, but I go to the meetings and I pay attention, and I see a lot of misinformation that people post, that they don't understand the issue. They may be passionate about something, but they really aren't understanding what is happening. And so if you glean some information by coming to these meetings, get on Front Porch Forum and share that with the community. Like, that voice is really important, and probably more important than people who don't understand and who are, passionate in the moment and think one thing, but when the reality is something else. I think it's contingent on all of us in the community to set the record straight and share information with one another. And I had a nice conversation with David earlier today via email about that. So I appreciate that we can have those dialogues, and you also get to know your neighbors. So I don't think it's just the school board's job. I think it's all of our jobs. And thank you, everybody, for staying so late.
Any other comments or questions? Oh.
I'm Shannon Hart. I'm from New Haven. I am one of the young families that moved here. I've lived in Vermont my whole life, and I'm some sort of generation Vermonter. Yeah.
Shannon, I'm not sure, can everybody on Zoom hear?
I can be much louder if you'd like. Very gifted at
Louder would be better.
Oh, it would be better.
Perfect. Oh gosh, I'll stand up. I've been like afraid to say something. I'm very nervous at these things. My oldest is actually just in first grade at New Haven. And I've got a scrumptious 2-year-old that'll be there in 2027. It wasn't until about 30 minutes ago that Patrick stated that those people are not on the chopping block and we are not all hostages to the vote, that they'll all lose their jobs unless we vote yes. Possibly in the sweetest way possible, maybe also saying that somehow to the community of like, it's not like, if it's no, that night, they're fired, they're getting, because I also have a very medically demanding child and I've been very afraid to approach the board. I don't always understand how it works. And I think a lot of community members are that way. I don't want to put words in everybody's mouth, but I just wanted to make that gentle comment of like, I feel better leaving this meeting, but it's also been 2.5 hours. And a lot of people are seeing a lot of information in other places and aren't getting the 2.5-hour discussion. And yes, they could come to the meetings, right? But again, as a young family member, I'm very new to the school environment. That might be a way to reach the community a little bit more.
It's also really nice to have like the back and forth dialogue a little bit, whereas like we can actually kind of talk to you guys instead of just being stared at and then maybe we'll chat later on an email. Like, I don't know how we can change that and maybe that's something to talk to the the state about as well, but.
Well, that's something we can work into how we do board work. We're learning all the time, right? This is like, we have how many new board members? New like a year or, yeah.
2 meetings.
Okay, 2/3 of us are brand new people, so we are learning just as quickly what our community wants from us, how best to communicate with you, what it sounds like, what it feels like, what words might be triggering or misleading or giving a misconception, right? We heard a lot today about what that was like for all of you. So we're learning trying just as quickly as you. The difference is our ship turns like this,
Oh, yeah.
not easy.
There
So
was-
we're doing our best to turn that ship and to
Right.
be really mindful about what that looks like, because we have administration, we have staff, we have all of us that we balance out, right? But duly noted about one-liner, riffs are not like a hostage situation.
Right.
How could we better communicate that? Yes. And to the back and forth comment, that's Morgan Doan from New Haven. Thanks. That's definitely something we've discussed at the board level, but also we have the committees that are other times people can come and engage in that exactly in a much more private way. If you're scared to, which I'm sorry, please don't be afraid.
It's cool. I'm a cool person.
No.
Those committees, you have to go really looking for them.
Yeah.
You have to for me who doesn't understand or doesn't know how to navigate the school system.
Or have 2 young children.
Or has 2 young, because the 2-year-old's great, but she's a lot of work. And you have to go looking for those.
Yeah.
You have to really, and there was a lot of really big feelings here tonight, right? And then I feel better, but there's a lot of big feelings of people still out there. I know you guys work very hard. I appreciate you. It doesn't seem like super fun to be the target of all those big feelings. But maybe at another time mentioning to the community of the riffs aren't black and white, right?
I think that's something we can do fairly quickly.
Right.
That wouldn't be hard to do. Yeah. And we'll do better about trying to make all those agendas accessible, because that's, it's a big, we just got our own front porch forums for town, which is where a lot of communication is coming from now, which I'm demanding a lot of this board right now, on top of just this budget stuff, also adding on duties of how do we communicate, how do we get feedback, what does that look like? So we're trying.
Also here to help,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah.
If you need simple things, we can do them.
I appreciate that.
Turns out I can write a front porch forum post.
Love that.
got it.
Jen, I saw one hand over here and then I'll jump to you. Yeah.
Yes, Thomas Halpin from Bristol. I just wanted to thank you all for your time and your energy. That's appreciated. And, this discourse, is good. I think it's good. And, I would, perhaps it would be beneficial to see an ideal budget as well. Like we seem to be taking a four-man approach to it. I think if you want to attract new young people, perhaps an approach that is more visionary and positive, would be more productive. It's one of those universal laws we put out, you get that, so we're putting out, yeah, perhaps we should put out something more ideal. And perhaps if there was, here, a lack of trust, I'm too new to the system to really know where it comes from, but that I think needs to be addressed first, before we can move forward, and then perhaps, once that's addressed, we can implement some vision that, that is not, 6 months down the road, but 10 years down the road. But thank you all.
Jennifer Corrigan, Bristol. I just want to say that I actually, while it may have been needed to have been clearer that the cuts weren't black and white, if this budget goes down, we're ripping all of these people. I would like to say that I did appreciate seeing from somebody with more knowledge what those rifts were. My information was coming from a 15-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old who was picking up things at school. My teacher was cut. This department is cut. And so I appreciated knowing that exactly who received, what departments received these rifts. I'm concerned what our school will look like and what that looks like for my children coming through here, if those rifts happen, but having it come straight from the horse's mouth and not hearsay, I did appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other comments online? Yeah, Alan.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Alan Quinter, I don't have any comments, but what I'd like to see is a breakdown, and I've been asking for this. And I dealt with budgets and it's difficult. For teaching staff, can we get some kind of breakdown? There are 70 teachers, 40 at Mount Aid, 10 in Robinson, I think it could work and then it could backfire. But we need to see the data, and we're not it was probably available back in November when you were putting the budget together, but people like me blew it off or something, and looked at it and didn't until it hit your wallet. And so I would like to see, like here, other school, it's a big chunk of the budget. Who are these staff members? Are they guidance people? Are they what? Coordinators and so on? Because we know, and it would help to know how much special ed, how many staff members, how many students it supplies and so on. And I think we need a superintendent's office. But we need to look at these big items and present it to the public. And I don't know what else I could say, but that's gotta be key. How many staff members? What is other staff? How many students is special ed? What's the staff in there? Of course, we don't have a lot of control over that because we get the $6 million for special ed. So, but we need to know these things and not worry about the RIF. I think people should know that we don't want to cut teaching staff, but maybe we'll have to cut other. So I think that's a key. The board has to put something out that says teaching staff is key, and if you say that, then you need to say, well, maybe we're gonna have to look at coordinators or whatever under other teaching. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Totally.
School consolidation is gonna happen. It has to. I mean, if it's gonna save us money, it's gotta happen. We need to keep pushing for consolidation. I know it got shut down, got voted down, and our taxes are still going up, our student body's going down. Our numbers, it just makes sense to have consolidation, and it needs to be pitched more and more and more. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any other comments before we adjourn this meeting? Yeah, David.
I second that gentleman's motion. We've got to do something. We've got to recognize the direction we're headed and accommodate. It's a business, guys. You got a product. You say it's a good product, but the customers are just not coming in. Got a declining customer base. You got an increasing cost of production. The wrong direction.
Thank you, David.
I'd like to thank Mike for the time and energy he put together in this
Yeah.
presentation.
Okay. I'm gonna ask that we get a motion to adjourn at 8:45 PM.
So move.
Second.
Steve and Kathy, all those in favor of adjourning at 8:45 PM, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you all for coming.